over the weekend, Donald Trump couldn't help but finally face the truth. He lost and Biden won in the general election. And he admitted as much in a tweet where he wrote, he won because the election was rigged. No vote watchers or observers allowed, vote tabulated by a radical left, blah, 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 more unfounded lies about voter fraud and nonsense. But the point here is he admitted that Biden won. Now later he ended up backpedaling a little bit, arguing, by the way, this morning that he won the election in all caps. But Trump also later said that Biden only won in the eyes of the fake news media. But in reality, an increasing number of GOP lawmakers are speaking out and saying, no, it's not looking good. Biden won. Sorry. Now, meanwhile, federal judges are growing increasingly frustrated with the Trump campaign and the frivolous lawsuits that they've been filing in key battleground states. So, for instance, who wouldn't be frustrated if you're hearing a case that's being represented by someone who sounds like this?
You start doing ballots like this.
So there's Rudy Giuliani, Donald Trump's personal lawyer, who is not getting paid for his services, which makes it more clear that this is more of a PR stunt and a grift by Donald Trump and his campaign. But nonetheless, let me give you some specific examples of certain or specific judges, I should say, who have grown incredibly frustrated with these cases because the Trump campaign has failed to provide any evidence of voter fraud. So it's one thing to file a lawsuit, but you have to provide evidence for what you're alleging in your lawsuit. And again, his campaign has failed to do that. So in Clark County, Nevada, for instance, the Trump camp complained that poll observers weren't close enough to monitor what poll workers were doing. But the US District Judge, Andrew Gordon, wasn't having any of that argument. He responded to that lawsuit by saying, at what point does this get ridiculous? I think we're already there. We're already there. And by the way, Trump has yet to provide any real evidence, providing that there's widespread voter fraud. That's the main allegation that we're hearing from the Trump campaign. And according to ABC News, judge after judge after judge has asked, in essence, where's the beef? We have seen numerous instances where affidavits have been filed only to be immediately pulled back once tested in state and federal court. I would not be surprised that if these baseless allegations continue, judges will begin to threaten and indeed issue sanctions. And that is a statement from Carl Racine, the Attorney General for the District of Columbia.
So first of all, I love the panic of Trump in the morning. So he accidentally concedes and he screams, I won the election. You can almost hear him crying through the tweet. I sense tears dropping onto the phone as he was tweeting it. And now it's gotten to absolute desperation. So they're in such bad shape. Trump at one point was like, those aren't our lawsuits. What do you mean they're not your lawsuits? That's insane, right? Of course they're your lawsuits. He's like, well, there's a couple other ones too. Yeah, they also lost. They were your supporters, but you have definitely filed lawsuits and you have definitely lost them, nearly all of them. 18 filed in all, 16 are already lost. 2 are not perfectly resolved yet, but emphatically on the way to a loss. We'll give you more details on that in a second. In Pennsylvania, they had to withdraw one of the cases. Why? Because they're about to file and say, oh, we didn't have observers in the room when they counted the 682,000 ballots, et cetera. Then they realized they just can't say it. It's a lie. They've already been, chastised by a judge earlier in a case to not lie about that. So they just withdrew it. They're like, okay, because Trump is used to nothing but PR battles. And so he views everything as, I just lie my way out of this. And losing is winning. Remember, he said when he was bankrupt on 6 different occasions, he told people, oh no, that's really good business. And they believed it. And then people gave him more money and more money. After the first one, second one, third one, all the way through the 6th one, they kept giving him more money because marketing does work. It really, in a lot of ways, it brainwashes people. So he convinced half the country that losing all your money was good business. So now, in this case, he's thinking, oh, I'm just gonna call the loss a win and I'll just get everybody to believe it again. His problem with that is that you have to go to courts to actually have those decisions overturned, the decision of the American people, state by state, right? And when they go into courts, they're getting laughed or yelled out of court in ways that are unprecedented. I'll give you one expert here, and then I want to go back to the judges. Wendy Weiser is the director of Bipartisan Law and Public Policy Institute at the Brennan Center for Justice. We've interviewed them on this topic before. She said, when you go into court, quote, you are required to have some basis for believing your claims to be true. It has to be some basis in fact, not just wild speculation. And the bar isn't even that high. To not meet it is very unusual and inappropriate. So the one thing judges don't like is you wasting their time. And so when you but they're like, look, we're gonna hear out any case, especially on a national presidential election. But you're gonna come into our courts and then tell us, yeah, we don't have any evidence? It's beyond outrageous. And now the judges are starting to get livid.
Yeah, they really are. And just to be clear, the Trump campaign has filed at least 18 different lawsuits in battleground states. And so far, only 2 of those suits resulted in favorable rulings for the Trump campaign. Clearly not enough to undo the margin that Biden won by. But let me give you some other specific examples, Cenk. For instance, in Michigan, Judge Cynthia Stevens questioned attorneys about a sworn affidavit that Republican attorneys had gathered in which a witness said they were told about mishandling of ballots. And so her response to that lawsuit was this: what I have at best is a hearsay affidavit. If there is something in that affidavit that would indicate that the witness observed activity that would be a deprivation of the rights of poll watchers, I want you to please focus my attention on that. I heard somebody else say something. Tell me why that's not hearsay. Come on now. One lawyer representing the Republican poll watchers in Michigan also argued that coronavirus restrictions meant they were positioned as far as 20 feet back to the point where you can't see anything. And by the way, that's been refuted and they've provided no evidence of that. Judge Timothy Kenney rejected that argument in court where he says, where's the facts about that? I mean, they're just wasting people's time. Plaintiffs rely on numerous affidavits from election challengers who paint a picture of sinister, fraudulent activities occurring both openly in the TCF Center and under the cloak of darkness, Kenney wrote. This is the judge, of course, noting that those claims were decidedly contradicted by an election expert put forth by the defense. Then you move on to Pennsylvania, where, I mean, the situation is just beyond clownish at this point. So let me tell you where we're at right now. So in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, Judge Richard Haas grilled the Trump's lawyer about, campaign lawyer Jonathan Goldstein at a court hearing last week. He wanted to know the basis for Trump's claims of fraud. And here's what the judge had to say, Jake. He says, I am asking you a specific question and I'm looking for a specific answer. Are you claiming that there's any fraud in connection with these 592 disputed ballots? And at that point, the Trump campaign lawyer says this: to my knowledge at present, no.
And why are
what
you
are
here?
You doing?
Yeah, why are you here? Why are you in court? You went through this whole proceeding, blah, 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 and then at the end, the judge asked you point blank, you're here to prove fraud. Is there any evidence of fraud? No. And remember earlier, we told you also in Pennsylvania, they said, oh, they didn't allow poll observers in. So then the judge asked them, were there poll observers in? He says, yes, there was non-zero poll observers in. What does non-zero mean? Were there poll observers in the room? Yes. Okay, so the one that they withdrew in Pennsylvania just today, they were gonna again claim there were no poll observers, except that's a lie and already got proven to be a lie by his own lawyers in Pennsylvania in court. So they withdrew it and they're like, but we're filing something anyway. They're like, okay, what's your new claim? They're like, okay, our new claim is that in Democratic counties, they did what's called curing, which is if somebody hands in a deficient ballot in any way that you can tell it's not in a double envelope, it's not signed, etc., you could return it to them and have them return you their one and only vote. And they're like, well, Democrats did that in some of their counties, but Republicans didn't. But legal experts are like, wait, curing is perfectly legal. So why aren't you suing the Republican counties for not helping you in your cause by curing the defective ballots in the Republican counties? Why are you asking to throw out ballots that are perfectly legal? They're like, I don't know. The other cases were even weaker, so we're going with this one. And then people ask, and that's why this will get tossed out instantaneously as well. They say, okay, well, how many ballots does this curing affect? A couple hundred, maybe. Well, Biden won Pennsylvania by 70,000 votes. So even if you were totally right, and the thing that is legal, we retroactively made illegal, you would still lose by a lot. I mean, look at that earlier case in Pennsylvania. 592 cases. They admit in open court that they're lying about it. But even if they had won, you'd still have 69,400 votes left to overturn. So this is nothing but an ego trip for Trump. So he could say later, no, I won, man. I went to court, and if those the Republican Secretary of State in Georgia is cheating with Biden, so is the Republican governor of Georgia, and so is the Republican city commissioner in Philadelphia, and so are all the judges, some of which I appointed, and a lot of which Bush appointed. They're all lying and cheating on behalf of Biden. Re-elect me in 2024. That's the plan.
There's this debate right now about whether or not what Donald Trump is doing is dangerous. And I don't think that Donald Trump is going to be able to, strong arm his way into the White House for a second term. But I do think it's dangerous in that right now there is some percentage of insane people who totally believe what Trump is selling. There are right-wing gang members who have no problem engaging in violence. We saw some of that violence over the weekend in DC. And so it's dangerous to an extent when you consider how unhinged some of these supporters can get and how they do not in any way, feel that violence is bad if they need to use the violence to defend their dear president. I mean, it's unbelievable and it's so ridiculous. It's wasting resources, it's wasting these judges' time. And the other harm that we're seeing is that Biden wants to get started, right? He's about to inherit an economic disaster because of how Trump has handled coronavirus. He's also going to inherit Donald Trump's awful handling of coronavirus, and he wants to make sure that he has a game plan in place. So once he's, in charge, once he's inaugurated, he can actually move forward with a plan that makes sense to at least slow the spread of this virus. But Trump refuses to engage in the transition process. And so Biden isn't able to have intel briefings. He's not able to have conversations with various health experts to begin this process. It's just absolutely shameful and embarrassing what this country is going through because of the man-child who sits in the White House right now.
Ironically, what they've proven is that election security in this country is way better than I expected. They literally haven't found anything. By the way, if you're a Republican or a MAGA guy and you don't believe me, find one case that they have won, let alone one case that they have presented any evidence in. And so they've lost all of those cases because they couldn't find a single instance. If they find one instance, I'm afraid that he goes, oh, now it's debatable. 1 versus 330 million, it doesn't matter. And one of the talking points that his lackeys were going out with over the weekend is how much voter fraud is an acceptable level. In other words, we find one vote that was wrong, we want you to throw out every single vote in the country. In fact, if you listen to that insane idea, there was a guy who voted twice for Trump in Pennsylvania. According to Trump's own logic, then Biden automatically wins the state of Pennsylvania. Now, how could that possibly make sense? As it stands, Biden's already won the state of Pennsylvania. But this idea that one vote invalidates all other votes is insane, but they still haven't even found one wrong vote. But the longer he stays at it, the more that they're digging and digging and digging, and the more a third of the country at a minimum, that's full-blown Trump cult, believes that's it, democracy's in shambles. We got to resort to something else other than democracy because there's a giant conspiracy of brain juice harvesting pedophiles who are fixing the election. I'll never let go of that. A full 50% of the Republican Party believes that the Democratic Party is run by a ring of child pedophiles, and also another 50%, or probably a very similar 50%, think that it is possible that they're also doing child cannibalism and brain juice harvesting. So you think Trump can't get them to believe forever and ever and ever that this election was stolen, and that for that to then grow and fester as a wound that becomes super hard to heal over time? Of course that's what's happening right now, and every day that he delays, it gets worse and worse. Finally, on the legal proceedings, Rick Hasen is one of the top legal experts on election issues. He's at the University of California, Irvine Law School. He's a professor, and he had this quote. He said, at this point, there is no path. He said, Rudy Giuliani can say what he wants and the president can keep declaring that he's won, but there's no plausible legal way this election gets overturned. We're not talking 3 Hail Marys anymore. We are talking done. Even if he threw 3 Hail Marys in a row, it still wouldn't be enough to overturn the results of the election. So there isn't a single rational lawyer in the country who now believes that this election is anything but done. But Trump is still screaming into the abyss and getting a third of this country. And most importantly, over 90% of Republican elected officials are still to this day lying on his behalf, full well knowing, 100% knowing that it's a lie. And they're all doing it in unison because it's no longer the Republican Party, it's the Trump Party. And the fact that this late, 2 weeks after the election, they still haven't broken ranks and they're still 100% behind something that they know for a fact is a lie, shows you the deep corruption of the Republican Party and that it is rotten to its core. And their only governing principle now is, what does Daddy Trump want us to do? It's a sick, sad party. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.